Afternoon, everybody. So glad you guys are here. We have Mr. Brad Thompson, and he is going to talk about life after the yellow bus. So I'm going to let Brad go ahead and take it away.
Mm. Well, first of all, let me just tell you that I'm honored to get to be with you and to have this conversation with you, and I really hope that it's beneficial to you, and that it's a little harder to have a guided dialogue conversation when you're uh, on Zoom, but to the best of my ability, I want this to fit the things that are interesting to you or questions that you have. And I would just start by telling you, of course, I don't know where any of you are on the age spectrum with your children, but no matter what, I believe that thinking about what you want for your child in adulthood should be must do work. And if we do that well, no matter how old our children are, it will really help in decision making, especially when those decision making times are difficult. Um, and before I get too far into this, I want to say that there are some rules to this game that I call it, and there are four of them. And the first one is parents know best, but they don't know everything. And the reason that's important is because no one knows my child better than I do, or at least they shouldn't. And what that means is that in any meeting, whether it's school or doctor or social services, wherever we might be, we have some pieces to the puzzle that is Haley that no one else has. And our ability to share those pieces helps them to help her and us. And by the way, I guess I should say that my daughter Haley is a person with special needs. She is now 31 years old, well into adulthood, and we are still needing to do this work for her in different settings. So yes, what that really means is I'm old. Okay, but we'll deal with that later. The second thing that parents knowing best means is we don't know everything, which means we need to build a team around our kids that help us fill in the gaps that where we don't have expertise. And so what I hope is that speaking into knowing best gives me courage. Understanding that I don't know everything should create humility. And I think when we bring those two things together in a healthy way, we are able to be the best possible advocates for our kids, regardless of their age. The second rule is that we as parents really need to educate ourselves so that we are the best and most healthy advocates. I see too many times parents who really are passionate about advocating for their kids, not really knowing the rules or the guidelines or the boundaries, and because of that, they lose credibility when trying to advocate for their kids. So, really important that we educate ourselves and so that we navigate the system the way it's supposed to be. And then the third rule is we just have to take care of ourselves. Uh, this is a marathon; it's not a sprint. And if we don't pace ourselves for that long run, we will not get as far down the road as we could. It breaks my heart, having worked with families who have kids with special needs for over 20 years now, how many really passionate, really engaged, involved parents end up in what I call the ditch of burnout, because we try to do everything all at once, and we just can't maintain that pace. And so if I paint this as a marathon, Haley, regardless of the amount of specialists she has in the medical field, she is relatively healthy, meaning that at 31 years old, she may just be halfway through her journey. Well, if we are going to get her as far down the road as we can, we're going to have to pace ourselves and take care of ourselves to stay on the journey with her for as long as possible. And then the fourth and last rule I have is that we just have to nurture a sense of humor. We have to be able to laugh. And quite honestly, one of the ways I know if parents are in a good space with their kids is that they can laugh when I tell stories about Haley. Because the truth is, Haley just does some funny things that wouldn't be funny if she didn't have some special needs. That's just the truth. And if I look around and see people, which I can't see you in this setting, but if I look around and see people who are offended by that, I get the idea that we're not really at that place of acceptance of who our kids are. And so I want us to be able to laugh. And if that means you laughing at me today, that's okay too. People laugh at me on a regular basis. Sometimes I intend it, sometimes I don't. It's just life with Brad. So if you're, I want to take one step back before looking ahead and ask the question: if you're stuck in survival mode, how do you plan ahead? Okay. Um, we all experience survival mode. We are hopefully, Lord willing, on the tail end of a global pandemic that has placed us all in survival mode at the same time. And what that looks like is when you don't know what the future holds, there's no way to plan for it, right? And so in the pandemic, when you're getting mixed messages or the message changes every day, every week, every month, it's impossible to start planning ahead. And we've all experienced that. When we have kids with special needs, we experience that without a pandemic, and that just looks like I don't know what I'm doing, I don't know where I'm headed, I just need to get through the day. Now there's a benefit to that, right? That the benefit of survival is we get through the day. But if we just survive every day, we tend to wake up in the same place over and over and over again. The other part of survival mode is I just say it's the least efficient way to live. It takes just as much energy to tread water as it does to swim to shore. And yet survival is just about treading water. And the greatest challenge to survival mode is that adulthood's coming, and it's coming whether we're ready or not. And so I want to just challenge you to push through that. And the way we do that is to get to a point of accepting our kids as they are, with their strengths, with their challenges, and we recognize that they have a bright future. Might not be the future we were expecting, but it's a bright future where they have an opportunity to use their gifts and talents to make a difference in the community and the world they live in. And that's what I really want to talk about, and that's what gets me really excited in talking to families and educators and service providers is I want everyone engaged in our kids' lives to have an appropriate but big picture of what our guys can do in the world. I really believe this. I used to call this a dream, but over time, and it never quite fit because dreams can give the impression that they're not really realistic. And if we talk about realistic dreaming, well, is that really dreaming? And so I've decided to call them realistic opportunities. And all I mean by that is that this is the best possible life for our kids. And the best possible life will come from opportunities that we nurture and develop. Okay. They will not come from government entitlements. They will not come from school opportunities, although all of those things can be a part of the process for getting there. But those things themselves will not get your kids and even your family to that best possible life. Um, And so the question becomes, what do you see your students doing as adults? Okay. And I have parents all the time, especially parents of younger kids, telling me, Brad, they're 6, they're 7, they're 8, they're 10. I don't know what they're going to do as adults. And I quickly say, you're right. I didn't know what I was going to do when I was 10, and I didn't know what Haley was going to do when she was 10. But are we looking? Stephen Covey, in his book, it's interesting that in the last year has kind of made a comeback, even though it's 25 years old. Uh, in one of his 7 habits is begin with the end in mind. Those of you who are educators, you probably have a lot of familiarity with the idea of executive function. And part of executive function is that you start with done, right? Well, what does done look like for our kids? That's that picture of what we see them doing as they move toward adulthood. Well, um, so we ask questions. What are their gifts? What are their skills? And and the truth is, Haley can't do anything, right? She she can do something. And as a person of faith, I believe that she was uniquely created exactly as she was supposed to be to accomplish the purpose that is her life. Well, if that's the case, that's her best possible life. And our job as people on her team is to create the environment that allows her to become that person. Okay. Too often, and we do this a lot in ARD meetings and doctor's visits and therapy visits, we spend a lot of time talking about deficits, right? We introduce the idea of an IEP based around qualifying for services because. And that doesn't mean that somebody's being mean or talking bad to us. It's that's why we qualify for services, right? Um, what if we focused on what they do well and then looked at those areas of struggles to see how we could remove some of those barriers as best we could so that they don't get in the way of our kids working in their giftedness. Um, I love asking this question to folks. And the question is simple. If there were no services, what would you do? Well, what I think most of us would not do is just go into the corner and kind of shrivel up and just wait to die. I think most of us would try to figure out ways to make the most of the life we've been given, right? And this is a really important mindset to develop because as we move toward adulthood, services get more and more limited. And so, what's important for us as people that are just on Haley's team, and remember, and I'll say it again later, that this is Haley's team, it's not my team, that building a big team and having a community that will support her and her mission and vision and dream for her life is really the key to having a fulfilling adulthood for her. And so, if that's the key, uh, what uh, what would it look like to build a big team? Well, before I get too much further, I think there are a couple of obstacles that come that get in the way of building a team. The first one is anger. Okay, and whether you're a parent who's been around other parents or you're an educator or whatever role you play, um, we know what anger does. And whether you're mad about the situation or the child's condition, or you're just looking for someone to blame or someone to take it out on, it's really hard to build a team when you come from a position of anger. And how do we how do we identify that? Well, sometimes you just see it. Other times I hear it. I hear it in phrases like everything would be fine if, or that, and with that usually being followed by someone not doing their job well, or in my opinion, they could do it better, right? The other thing that will keep us from finding our child's best life is overprotection. And the truth is that yes, there are some bad people in the world. And unfortunately, they're the ones who make most of the news, right? But the truth is, another truth is that the overwhelming majority of people that we come in contact with are great people. And as we go through life with Haley, what we have found is that there are far more people who will love her and look out for her and support her and help her, by far more people than those who would do her harm. But as long as we overprotect and as long as we live in fear, we will never find those people who will be on her team. So this is really where community comes in big time. And then the question becomes, how big is yours? How big is your community? So if you're working with me, I meant to tell you at the first, if you don't have a piece of paper and something to write with, I'd love for you to grab one now. And whether you're the parent of a child with special needs or not, I would like for you to make a list of who's on your team. Who's on your team? Whether you're the head of Region 14 or the leader of deaf blind services, whatever your role is, who's on your team? And this is really important, when you're the parent of a child with special needs. And this is where the realistic opportunity or the dream really becomes important. Because if you don't have a picture of your child in adulthood using executive function language, if you don't have a picture of what done looks like, how do you know who you even need on your team? Right? How do you know what services you need? On the other side, how do you know what services you can do without? Uh, One of the things that I see regularly in working with parents are parents that don't have a dream for their kids ask for everything, which is, if you don't know what you need, it's a pretty good strategy because you never know what you might need. So we ask for everything. Well, if I'm receiving, we all know that services are in short supply, right? So if I'm asking for things that I don't need, am I taking that service away from someone who does need it? And and that should bother me a little bit. Also, if there are things that I don't need, is that taking away time from Haley working in or experiencing the things that will help her to develop into her potentials? Um, um, you've seen it in the last year, right? You see all across the country, and it's not related to special needs at all, but you see people hoarding things, right? I mean, last March, how hard was it for you to find a roll of toilet paper or paper towels or box of Kleenex, right? And it was all from people being afraid that they might need something that they don't have. And um, and and I think we do that when we don't have a clear picture of where we're headed. Um, I see it in ARD meetings on a regular basis where parents are being told by advocates that, I'm not happy with, but you take everything you can get. Well, why? if it doesn't fit with where your child's headed, why do you need it? And and why not let someone else have it? Or maybe by letting go of something, it allows you to create a better schedule and a better routine for your child to get what she needs. Um, I, I wonder how different our ARD meetings and transition meetings would go if we only asked for what we needed. I wonder how much more credibility we would have as parents if in one of these meetings we actually said, well, I don't think she really needs this, but she would really benefit from that. I think you would find people would be a whole lot more ready to just help you and serve you in those things that you deem as important because it's clear that you've done your homework. So, and you know where you're headed, and you can even share that dream with her or them. I want to make a clarification. I've mentioned it a couple of times, but I see it a lot in families. And what I want you to know is that this team that I'm talking about is not mine. It's Haley's. And that is a really important distinction to make. It's really easy for parents, especially parents who have kids with special needs, to have a certain amount of enmeshment in it, and you can tell that they have it when you start hearing them talk a lot about we and us. And the truth is that when Haley was in school, we didn't have homework. She did. We don't have doctor's appointments. She does. And you say, well, and you're right that sometimes it's just kind of a figure of speech, but sometimes we can recognize that there is no separation between the parent and the child, and there is a we thing, and that lack of identity can be a really challenging thing as you try to work with families. So uh, and so when we're enmeshed and when it's our team, then it's easy for it to become about me, and it's never supposed to be about me. It's always supposed to be about Haley. And the truth is that I don't need people on Haley's team to like me. I like it when they like me, makes it easier. Um, but I don't need them to like me. I need them to share the vision of Haley's future. And I need them to do that when she's young, and I need them to do what they can in their season of life to further her journey toward that vision. And as they do that, they have become valuable members of her team. And I want parents to see it that way, that it is Haley's team. And the older she gets, the more and more ownership, as is appropriate, that she gets to take for her life and what she does with it and how she navigates life. And so understanding that helps all of us. So I would love for you to do a little exercise, and this is even more difficult in a webinar setting, but done it before, and I know you can do it. I believe in you. Um, so I want you to take that piece of paper that you had building your team, and you flip it over. If you didn't do that exercise, shame on you, but get a piece of paper now and do it. And you will see two little smiley faces on my slide, and then the big Haley's team circle in the middle. I think everybody can draw a smiley face. And so I want you to do that. And what that represents is your child today. Okay. And then I want you to draw another one on the far right side of the paper. And I want that to represent your child at 25. Um, Nothing magic about 25. It just looks like adulthood. It's post public school education, it's getting into the workforce, etc. But it's just a number. And the question that I want to ask you is, how do you see them at 25? And you may be sitting there listening to me today going, but Brad, she's 4 or she's 10. And I'm like, yeah, okay. And how do you see them in adulthood? But I don't know what they're going to do. And I'd say, you're right. But what if this is not about what they're going to do and more about the person that you want them to be? Okay, that I want, and we have a son, Justin, who's 18 months older, and he's quote unquote typically developing. There were some periods in his life that we really questioned the idea of typical, if it even existed. Nevertheless, um, we didn't know what he was going to do with his life. But even as very young children, don't we know what we want our kids to be? Like for the Thompson family, and I'm not suggesting that you have our values, you choose your values, but I would imagine that most of us want our kids to have good work ethic, right? I would assume that most of us would want our kids to learn to be respectful. I would assume that we would want most of us would want our kids to be good stewards of the things they've been given, gifts, talents, ability, those things. Well, if those things are true, that those are the people that you want your kids to be in adulthood, can't you start teaching them those things when they're 4? Right? I mean, if you're still throwing a fit when mom tells you to pick up your toys, is that respectful? No. Is is it good work ethic to pick your toys up at the end of playtime or whatever? Yeah, we start teaching those things early in life. Why? Because I don't want my kids to be exposed to work ethic when they're 21 years old. I don't want the first test of their respectfulness to come when they have a job outside of my home, right? Well, we're starting to teach that early. And if we can start to picture that, I still have no idea what they're going to do with their life, but I have a picture of who I want them to be. And that becomes really important. The next thing we need is to build that team in the middle. And that's that big circle that sits right there. And what I'd like for you to do is to draw about 10 lines that stick out from that circle. And on those lines, I want you to start listing the names of people that are on Haley's team or your child's team. And think in terms of the roles that they play also. That, when Haley was in elementary school, Ms. Mack would have been on one of those lines, and she was her primary special education teacher. As she got older and got in high school, and even in her college experience, she was in a group, and gosh, he's such a big part of her team. My problem is she always calls him bunny ears, but he was her high school principal, and he was a huge part of her team, and he taught us a lot about how to navigate meetings and those things. Her brother Justin is on her team. We keep drawing the lines and filling in the gaps. Now, who else is on that team? And what roles do they play? And as your kids get older, what you'll find is that some people fall off your team and others are added. Well, so then based on the dream that you have for your child, if I'm going one further, who's missing? Okay. Who's missing from her team? So in order to answer that, I really have to go back to where we started, right? What do you picture her doing or being in adulthood to have any idea who's missing from her team, right? Right. So where's she going? Then look at the people that are on your team and ask the question. And maybe we need to ask our team. So if we want Haley to work in the Montessori daycare, which she does, what are the skills and talents she needs? Okay, whether it's physical health concerns, social skills, whatever those things might be, what does she need? Do we have someone on our team who can teach her those things? If not, where do we find them? Okay. And that's why that question of if there were no services, what would we do? It becomes really important because we all know this, right? Services are scarce. Opportunities, especially as we get into rural communities, can be hard to find, and resources can be really hard to find. And so we have to start looking for those informal or non-traditional services. Well, how do we meet that? We do that in our community, right? We find that person. Maybe they go to church with us. Maybe they're in the Rotary Club or whatever it might be, that we find these people who know and love our kids and just want to be able to help them. And so that's how we build out our team. But we don't even know the questions to ask if we don't know where we're going. Uh, and so as you look at your team, where are the holes? Who would you like to add, or what role would you like to add? Okay. For many of our kids, as they start moving into adulthood, the roles that we find the hardest to fill are social opportunities and friends. Where do we find those? Uh, Haley would, if she were with me today, she would tell you that she works 2 jobs, and everybody at those 2 jobs love her dearly, but they don't socialize with her for the most part. She's not meeting them after work, uh, primarily because I'm her ride and I just want to go home after work. But you can call me selfish if you want. That's on me. Um, but so where does she find social opportunity with her peers? Where does she make friends who live a similar life as her? Well, those are tough questions to ask. When we're in school, we go to school, and that's where we're with our peers, and that's where we have friends. Um, that's where we get our social opportunities as well. As we move into adulthood, those things become harder to find. Um, so looking at the idea of who's missing is an important thing, and growing your team. The next thing that I think is really important is asking ourselves the question, does anyone on your team ever disagree with you? And I'm going to tell you that if the answer is no, how do you ever get new information? If you fire, quote unquote, anyone who disagrees with you, how do you ever get a fresh perspective? Now, my dad passed away several years ago. One of the things he told me that has stuck with me, and he told me early in life and repeated it many times. I don't know why he thought he needed to repeat it, but he did. And what he would tell me over and over is, Brad, you already know what you know. So the only way you're going to learn anything different is to be quiet, ask questions, and engage people who think differently than you. And I kind of blew that off as most teenagers and young adults would do. But as I've gotten older, I've found that to be a very valuable and powerful piece of advice. And so getting people on our team that have a fresh perspective. Now, remember, at the baseline, they love Haley and they share Haley's vision for her adulthood. That doesn't mean we always agree in the details of it. And I usually tell the story around uh, IEPs, but the truth is that there are a bunch of different ways to teach a child how to read, right? Why would I argue over the technique used to read when there are plenty of techniques that work just fine for a variety of kids? When the goal is to read better, right? So, um, so I'm a firm believer that Karen, especially, dad's a little iffy, but Karen, moms know their kids better than anyone in the world. So they always have a part to play. But it's really important that we have people who on Haley's team who see her from a different perspective. And when we do that, then we get a more holistic view of what she can do, what she struggles with, and we move her closer to her best possible life. Um, I hope we can agree that people can share our vision and disagree with how to get there. And if we're honest, how many times in your life have you thought, man, this will be great? And you run down that road only to find out that it's not near as great as you thought it might be. Well, that should give us some humility. Um, so, last thought, and then I'll answer questions if you have any. I believe that every human being has great purpose. And I think for the most part, it's we as humans who have categorized what gifts and strengths and talents are more important or less important. But I believe that all of us were given gifts to make a difference in the world and in the community in which we live. And when we create spaces for people to fulfill that purpose, our communities get better and our worlds get better. The question for us as people who work with kids with special needs is really, are we creating that environment that will allow our children with special needs to fulfill their purpose? And what I want you to know is that if we are doing that, we are being faithful, and that is all that is ever required of us. Questions, thoughts, arguments, all are welcomed.
Hey, Brad, I'm Linda, and I just want to say thank you for talking about students at a young age. What are they going to do when they're finished with school? I taught elementary life skills, and I had cute little guys, just cute little darling guys, and people wanted to baby them
Mm,
because they're so cute and hold them and all that. And in my mind, I was thinking, just like you, what are they going to look like when they're finished with school? It's my job as a teacher to get them to be able to follow directions.
hmm
And that was my main goal, for them to follow steps and follow directions. If they were never going to be like live semi-independent, maybe they'll live in a group home. If they're
Yep,
able to follow directions, they're going to have a really good life and, possibly a job. And
yep.
when they're little, that's where it starts. They have to start learning when they're little. I love how you said that. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, they're not going to be little and cute forever. The world's going to have expectations.
Hey, Brad, this is Cody Martin. I just had something to add to Linda's. I have a question for you. Are there certain activities that you recommend, like in school and outside of school, that really help empower students with disabilities to help them foster independence? What can we do, more of in school and outside of school to really work on that independence?
Oh, that's a great question. Um, One of the things that we have to do as parents and educators, for that matter, is we really have to come to grips with our fear. It's I I say it this way: it's relatively easy for me to struggle. It is really, really difficult to watch our kids struggle. And when you throw in special needs, it's even more difficult to watch our kids struggle. But the truth is, I think that we were created to do hard things, even our kids with special needs. And the only way we learn new things is to try hard things. And so for us as parents and educators, we have to be okay with letting our kids struggle, because it's the only way they're going to learn. So while if they're 4, 5, 6, 10, 12, I'm not trying to get them to take the step to 25 in the next step. What's the next step that gives them just a little independence? If we want them to learn a little something about money, do we let them pay for their own lunch at school? If we want them to learn a little bit about time management, will we let them go from one class to the next by themselves? Just taking that little next step that fits with what is the picture in adulthood for them. So they make that move. Does that help at all?
Yes, I can say that would be hard that's hard for me as a teacher sometimes to see the kids struggling like that, but I think you're spot on that sometimes we have to take a step back and let them go through that struggle a little bit, because that's how we all learn. So I know that can be difficult for teachers and parents as well, but thanks.
Sure. Well, just think, how many more lessons have you learned from failure than you've learned from success? And for some reason we think, well, this child with special needs has such a hard life that we can't let them fail. Well, that almost goes against everything we know about human behavior, right? Which is, if we learn things when we struggle, we figure things out as we struggle. You get as practical as you want. When Haley was 4 years old, it was way easier for me to just tie her shoes and let's get out the door. Right? Well, if I still want to be tying her shoes at 31, then I will never let her struggle. Right? And at my age, it's hard to bend over to tie her shoes. So, I really need her to be able to do that.
I also want to add to that too. Confidence. When you let your students go through and have the challenges and you're watching them as they're going through it, you're building their confidence, their self-confidence.
Yes. And this may or may not apply to our kids with special needs, but we have this second epidemic that's going on these days, and that is anxiety. And generically speaking, the question that we're asking in anxiety is, can I handle this? Well, how do we know we can handle the next thing? Well, we don't if it's new, but we take confidence into the next thing because we can look back and see all the things that were hard for us at one time that aren't hard anymore. We figured it out. We struggled. We figured it out. We mastered it. We at least got competent at it. Well, which tells me that the next hard thing that comes in my path may be hard, but I can do hard. In fact, we were created to do hard. Well,
Brad, this is Brenda, and I just read an article yesterday, and I was looking for it, about how we demoralize children when we step in and work the problem for them, or we do it for them. And just like you said, we're not building that confidence. So someone has done the research on it, and I've always said we develop these prompt dependent kiddos. or they feel like they can't do anything unless they look at you for confirmation that it's correct. They have to have a prompt to do it first. And so I think that is a huge step. Everything you are saying is spot on for success in life.
Thanks.
Brad,
And I have a question. Oh,
go ahead.
Go ahead, Lisa.
Oh, it's okay. I wanted to kind of move back to the point that you were talking about, the team and Haley's team, or your child's team, rather than it being your own team as a parent. So what are some additional things, or just some real practical things you could give parents on, advocating for your child in a collaborative way with that team? Just any additional hints on when you're going into those ARD meetings and getting ready to sit in those, and how can we work better together as a team?
Y'all may be able to tell that I'm a little bit of a Stephen Covey groupie, but one of his other 7 habits is seek first to understand, then to be understood. And I think sometimes it's really easy for us as parents who have kids with special needs to kind of think that this is all about us. And because of that, we go in with our agenda and our wants and needs, and we never really stop to think or even ask, what are the challenges that the school or the teacher or the therapist is experiencing in trying to serve our kids? And so and what we learn from that is we see how passionate they are, that it's for 99% of you guys, this is not just a job, that you are passionate about changing the direction of a kid's life. And when we hear you start talking about the challenges you face in just doing your job, it allows us to humanize you a little bit more. It allows us to give a little more grace and a little more understanding. And even if you want to look at it from the self-serving side, it at least indicates to some degree you care about them. And I wanted our school people to know that I want them to be successful. I want them to look forward to Haley coming to their class. And I want them as a school system to be successful. Why? Because that success trickles down onto us. Well, what can I do to help you make coming to work just a little more fun? I kind of
Brad,
love
this is Casey Westmoreland. I'm sorry. Every time I try to talk, I talk with someone.
like the fact that I have the power to mute Lisa if I need to.
Well,
So anyway, Casey, go ahead.
you talking about friendships and things like that at Haley at this point in her life, how have you found, has technology been a help or a hindrance? Are there any online support groups or anything like that, either for Haley or for y'all as parents?
Yeah, the internet and technology is, we have a love-hate relationship with that, just like all of, it can be really good. And of course it gives people, in fact, we blocked a person last night from her Facebook page because he has it has gotten to a place where he looks like a stalker to us. And and at the same time, you say, well, why don't you just take her off Facebook? And the reason we don't is because she still talks to they're now young ladies that she was either the manager of the high school volleyball team with or the college volleyball team, that she still chats with on a regular basis. 10, 15, not quite 20 years, but at least 15 years later. Well, there's great value in that for her. The in-person things, it gets more challenging because as our kids move into adulthood, some of them drive, but most of them don't, which makes them dependent. And especially if you live in smaller areas, you don't have safe or, if any, public transportation. So how do they get to the gathering places where their peers are? It's hard. So we look at creating spaces in community. If you're church people, that's a great place. Karen, my wife, runs a Wednesday night program for adults with special needs, and we have about 100 adults on any given Wednesday, pre-COVID, of course. And let's be honest, they're not coming as much for the Bible story and the prayer time as they're coming for the space where that's where their friends come. That's a place every week that they get to be with their friends. And so sometimes it's about us as parents needing to create those spaces. The other is putting them in groups of people that the group of people is given an opportunity to love them and get to know them.
Okay, Brad, I have a question. I work with the early childhood kiddos, and so taking it back to that instead of as they're older, if you could give a couple of suggestions for advice for those kids that are just starting school that have those significant disabilities and what you guys did and to make that transition easier for them.
Um, for the kids or for parents or for both?
I think for both, I think kids are pretty resilient and they're all excited about going to school. And then we have our parents that don't want to let them go and they're not ready to do that yet. And just some advice for them, I think.
Yeah, our primary goal is to give families hope. And the way we have hope is to work through the struggles and the challenges, to find perseverance and to find skills that lead us to hopeful life. And what we learn is that as our kids are young, we get comfortable in settings, right? I tell this story when I'm talking to parents that we live in this kind of chronic grief process because every change in seasons of life kind of put us back into the beginning stages of it. And so just about the time we get comfortable with ECI, somebody tells us we have to go to kindergarten and we have to learn a whole new team and a whole new set of rules and all those. And it puts us in this state of survival because we don't understand or appreciate the environment that we're living in. Uh, I'm not in my own office today, so it's kind of funny. Um, but what we learn is in that new season, we get comfortable with those people and they become our team. And we just have to give it that space and remember that we are the carriers of that dream. When our kids are younger, we really struggle with the loss of those generic dreams. And I want people who work with our families to start helping them paint the picture of, I don't know what Haley's going to do when she's 4, but I believe she's going to make a difference somewhere. And mom, dad, I just, even if you have to borrow on my naive hope for that, I want you to. Because she's going to grow up. And I know we don't get to do this in public school, but as a person who's invited into it, I just believe that God was not caught off guard the day Haley Thompson was born. And I don't think he was having a bad day either. And if that's so, then she's exactly who she was supposed to be to make a difference in the way she's supposed to make a difference in the world. It's our job as parents to just create that environment that allows her to do that. Nothing more, nothing less. And so I want my younger parents to just borrow on that hope that I have for them. And then the other story I would tell is I do some work at the Turn Center in Amarillo. It's a pediatric therapy clinic. And we see about 1,500 families a year in a variety of settings. But one of my OTs told me the story when she was working at the University of Kansas, about a young man who the only control he had was in his head, and all the only thing he could do is hit a switch. What difference can he make? Well, this young man sat in his wheelchair at a door and hit the switch to open and close a door to a secure area that people couldn't touch. Did he have a purpose? Was he working to his potential? Is that the best possible life? Right? We're the ones who have created these levels of value, right? That's what I would tell your ECI parents and kids.
Well, Brad, thank you so very much. What a treat it was today for us to hear you. And I'm going to try not to cry a little bit about what you just said for our littles and for our other kids as well. We want to thank you for sharing all of your amazing information and sharing your family's experiences and giving us such great insight on being a parent and how to build that team. I love that whole team um, thing that you talked about. So, does anybody else have any questions for Brad or want to say anything to him?
Suzanne, we might want to tell the parents who are hopefully listening and who will watch this recording that we are going to be bringing Brad back to our area, and that we'll be doing some recordings of him with some more information that he has to share. So to be watching for that.
Yes, thank you, Lisa. And we will make sure that we get that out to everybody. So it is 1 o'clock, and I appreciate everybody that came on with us. And Brad, again, thank you so much. You are absolutely amazing. So thank you for being here.
It's my pleasure. Thank you guys for having me.
All right. Well, we will see you guys later. Thanks.